Hello, this is Blair Stanislao with the Happy Lion Center. Welcome to our podcast, Mystical and Infamous, where we have playful and easy conversations about anything mystical, getting to the heart of all things strange and weird. Join us in a bit of magical tomfoolery, spreading the alchemy of love and light. And now, we invite you to enjoy the show. When we're channeling or we're getting information, that this energy that's coming in doesn't have to have a name. I feel, for me, I would say the quickest way to describe it is, I can remember being a child. I grew up in the South, so I was Southeast, so I was essentially around a bunch of Christians, and there were a few others that I were friends with. And, I go to one person's house and they'd have a picture of Jesus or whatever. And then you go to somebody else's house, they got a picture of Jesus, but they don't look the same, right? And of course, I thought as a child, well, of course, that makes sense. Oh, that was that human construct of there's this idea of who Jesus is, and this is how it comes out, and this is how it becomes a thing. So I knew very quickly that this idea even of Jesus was not a human being. It's an entirely different thing. And if it's a different thing, then it doesn't have to have all those requirements like names and where they are in this idea of hierarchy, which is what, humans come up with. And my friend told me to talk to you because she said you had lots of enlightening things to say about that.
Well, just that if we start to name things, we start to limit the perception because, it goes back to quantum physics. You collapse the wave function and things become concretized as what it is. And if you're more fluid, more open, more abstract, you gain greater meaning of things because you're not confined to a box. So even if you're looking at a tree, if you call that a tree, then your mind goes, I know what a tree looks like. And you miss the amazing being that's standing in front of you.
Yeah.
So it's good to name because we have to organize the world according to labels, but don't get attached to the label. They're not, the map is not the territory. Have you heard that term?
Oh, no, I haven't thought about that, but it makes complete sense.
Right. So the words are the map, but it's not the reality. If you look at the books by Joseph Chilton Pearce, he says we live in a semantic reality. It means we live in a world of everything's been named and we're really disconnected from the actuality of the environment. So go out into the woods and be by yourself and don't name anything and be absorbed by the nature there. And you realize you're actually a part of that nature. You're not separate. Human beings think they're separate. They have to conquer nature. And, the indigenous cultures knew that they were part of nature. They lived in harmony with nature. They were in touch with, like, if there was an earthquake or a hurricane or there was something coming, they didn't panic because the earth talked to them. Mm-hmm. And so the problem is left brain, right brain. Our right brain, our intuitive brain has shut down because we've been so language based. We've been so identified with names and when you name something, you're just in the left brain and you make these assumptions about the nature of reality because someone told you that's what it is. But if you're in your right brain, you start to feel more, you start to tap into things. And that's what I teach is the difference in remote viewing. Remote viewing is the ability to disconnect from the left brain and to tap into the right brain, which is a non-local mind. Mm-hmm. That's how Stanford Research Institute, the CIA, proved that remote viewing worked for 50 years ago in the early 70s or maybe 60 years ago. But, it's not a new thing. It's age old, this intuitive high mind. So it's just stop identifying with your own name, with your own history, with your own thoughts. Mm-hmm. Yes, people are into self-realization, but what is the self? Well, the self is something you can't define. So how are you going to realize something you can't define? So you're better off just staying abstract and not, it's great to find yourself and realize yourself, but what's that you're realizing? It's the infinite. That's what you're realizing when you really, right?
Yeah.
who
Well,
you are.
even in coming to that part of where I am going with things, I am recognizing it's kind of hard because you're taking these big ideas, they're feelings, they're like concepts, but it's it is really restricting it, it's limiting it, it's shrinking it down almost in a way because as I mentioned to you earlier, we're taking the channeled messages. There's a little bit of like I don't know if there's a delay on my sound. I feel like I can hear myself later. Okay. Um anyways, come taking the messages that came through and channeling, it is very much a limiting smaller, it's like shrinking it down and trying to create it or write it in a way that can be received by the person reading it who is still like you're talking about, still in the left brain because we're still reading sentences and so forth. Um, so I guess that brings up the next question of language and the construct of these things. Like we use these words because they help us to understand, but like the construct of, I don't remember what you were just talking about, but you just used the word higher. And that's something that I've noticed for me is something that's in language, it continues to facilitate this illusion that there's better than or higher or lower or
Yeah.
there's this hierarchy thing going on.
That's true. There is no better than. There's no,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, maybe there's if you talk about frequencies, right? There are higher frequencies and lower frequencies. You talk about complexity theory. There's more complex systems that hold more information. And I think our soul has the capacity to hold information. And the deeper you get maybe into self-realization, the more the capacity of the soul expands. So we expand to have a greater understanding about the nature of reality. So it's not better or worse than anything. Everyone's on their own path. Eventually, everyone will get there, wherever there is. And, or not, but it's I think the nature of consciousness is to understand itself,
Yeah.
which is like it's like walking towards the horizon because there's always the infinite, that's out in front of you. So I think people do make progress in understanding themselves. Socrates said, "Know thyself," right?
Mhm.
And so I think in knowing yourself better, we're happier. If you don't know what's making you unhappy, you're never going to get to the root of that. But if you start the self-realization, looking at yourself and saying, okay, I can improve my life here, here, and here. This doesn't make me happy. I'm letting go of those friends that bring me down, that, drain my energy or whatever. Then yeah, I think we're here to be happy. We're here to have experiences. We're here maybe not to solve the mystery, but to realize we're part of the mystery. That's not my original thing. That's Joseph Campbell. But yeah, Joseph Campbell said that, who really understood a lot. He understood that myths were true. Everyone thinks myths are made up stories, but myths symbolically tell the story of people's lives. Stories are what people are about, but don't get attached to the story. So it's like the Buddhists, don't get attached to your identification. Don't your political party, your baseball team, your whatever, because if you're attached to that identity, someone comes along and insults your baseball team or your political, then you take it personally. And people do that because they're glued to their television set. They're just said, be this, you're this, and because they don't, I'm not judging anyone, but they don't have a bigger life than their television set. So they identify with these false narratives, these false sense of self, and that's who they think they are. But if you call yourself anything, Krishnamurti said this, if you call yourself a Christian, a Jew, a Buddha, you've created a violent act because you've separated yourself from the quantum field. He doesn't say quantum, but from the totality. So we can use language to kind of move through time and space, but we can't stay attached to it. I don't know if that
So,
answered you.
yeah, what it brings to mind is that something that just happened recently within the last week or so. My son is 19 now. He just turned 19 and he's still at home and he's going to school, and we are butting heads like often parents and 19-year-olds do. And so through this process, he came to this realization that he has certain feelings that are essentially causing him problems. Okay. Which is really great that a 19-year-old even figured this out. And so he tells me this, and I talked to him a little bit about it with the work that I do. Like, you could do this and that kind of stuff. And then the next morning I woke up and I was like, you know what? You could do all that. You could figure out what the story is behind it. Why do you have all that going on? Blah, blah, blah. But if you really just want to deal with it and you want to heal it, skip all that and just recognize you just have it. It's there. So now go to the steps that you need to do to actually heal it or change it. And then you get to skip all that story stuff. I think we oftentimes get stuck on the stories, like you're talking about with the baseball. You're attached to whatever it is that you're calling your identity, and it really slows things down.
Yeah, I mean, if you get attached to your story, I mean, some people, there's a whole movement in psychology of just doing away with the story, the Freudian analysis, because all it does is keep you trapped in the story.
Oh my goodness, does it? Yes.
My mother did this person did this, and you're victimizing yourself. Okay, so but I think there is a bit of embracing the feelings, someone made you angry. So feel the anger. You don't have to lash out at someone because they made you angry or they're angry. So I think there's the acknowledgement of the feeling, and you don't need the story. I mean, sometimes the story helps, but not overindulgent.
Yeah. Well, so I also just went through something called Cutting the Ties That Bind, which I think was originally created by Phyllis Crystal, I think is her name. Okay, so, and I did it with Michael Sheridan. So there's some dream interpretation that goes in with it. And that's essentially what the goal was, is you get revealed through your dreams, these things that you need to look at, which are talking about the feelings. And through all of my work, that really is the thing. There is no, quote, objective reality. We can't get out of our own perspective, right? So it's not really about what's going on. There's no truth to it. It's just how you feel about it. That you have to deal with. So then here's my next question. So how does that translate for you into, like, I guess my question is really kind of, how did you come to this? Because I came to all this stuff through healing. So I eventually didn't realize I was doing this, but I was recognizing that certain things were not working for me, whether it's in the outside world or how I felt or whatever. There was something that wasn't working for me. So I went looking, and this is the path that I wound up on. So I guess part of my question is, because that common thread of experiencing the emotion or feeling the emotion, acknowledging it, not get hung up on it, but experiencing it allows you that energy to kind of flow more fluidly, which is more natural state. So how does that connect with the stuff that you're doing? How does that being in that flow state of acknowledging the feelings and experiencing them and then also allowing them to go? How does that?
Well, I mean, the stuff that I'm doing is actually going beyond all that. I'm looking at new realities, but it was all based on feeling, of course. It's all based on experience. And I think we're here to have great experiences, fantastic, joyful, inquisitive adventures in the 3D. That's why we incarnated here, because it's a really interesting place. And to avoid the traps of emotionality, but not lose the feeling. That's how I make the distinction. People get stuck, depressed people or angry people or indulgent people. They're attached to that identity as well. But it's not just an identity. It's actually a chemical in their body. Depressed people or take an angry person, right? And we all know somebody who's just waiting to be angry, and I try to stay away from that because I think my mother was like that. But it's a chemical. That's a chemical in their body. So when the chemical starts to wear off, they don't even consciously, but unconsciously find a reason to get angry because the body's saying we need those chemicals. So the way beyond that is to say, I'm getting that feeling like I'm supposed to be angry and I'm not going there. It's like you do cold turkey from the chemicals. So it's like, okay, I'm feeling this. Okay, someone's cutting me off. Do I indulge? Because if you indulge it, you keep the chemicals going. But if you just observe it, and I think that's really, you observe the feelings, you don't deny it, but you don't indulge it. So yeah, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling sad, but I'm just going to be the observer of reality is really the soul or the God essence, higher being, not higher or low, but the being, the essential being that is having the experience. So you want to feel it, but it'll pass through you like these thoughts. If you hold on to a thought, that's great. You could write it down or whatever. But if you hold on to that feeling, it becomes an emotionality. Feelings are what we have every moment, is my belief. So, and that's recorded in the soul as the Akashic records. People do Akashic record reading or whatever. They're just tuning into the soul, which is every moment recording the nature of reality, going past back to whatever lifetime it all began or whatever parallel dimensions you're living in. But it's the soul, the feeling capacity of the human being. And people, I make a distinction between the soul and the spirit. I don't know if this all answers your question, but what do you make as a distinction?
This between the soul and spirit?
Yeah.
Um, no, I don't think that I spend a lot of time on that because I don't, frankly, to be truthful, I don't want to get into the argument with somebody because a lot of times you use those words, depending on who you're talking to. People are identifying with certain constructs that they have. And if I'm talking about that energy, I don't want to get into an argument about that. I want to communicate the message.
Yeah. But I'm saying there's no right answer to this.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong. I'll just tell you my distinction. And it's not like the absolute because we're talking in terms that there are no absolutes, right? But from what I heard from one of my teachers, and that made sense to me, that's the only reason I'm sharing, is that the spirit, or whatever that means, is the spark of creation that's inside all of us. That is the vital force of beingness. And so we descended from the great spark, the great source itself. As it contemplated itself, it created all these infinite sparks. And then we went on to create levels and levels of density and creation. But in those adventures of creating, we needed a way to hold the wisdom of experience. And the wisdom of experience then was held by the soul, which was created by the spirit to hold, because otherwise we just have adventures, which is great, but the soul gathers the wisdom from each of those adventures, like your son. He had a realization, an awakening, and that was his soul kind of registering, oh, that's the wisdom of these experiences. And so I only make it seem because the soul houses, as we evolve, the evolution of that wisdom. And of course, we've descended from the great source and we're evolving back to that through understanding the play of reality as it interfaces with human experience, which is the fun of it all. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, did that answer anything?
Well, yeah, no, I actually, so what you said kind of was where my mind went originally, which is spirit. I would probably automatically kind of connect to the more of the oneness, like this thing that, like you're talking about, is the spark. But then the soul, I would say, because we usually associate this as a small part of one person, right? I mean, that's the etymology, right? But it is more like a container. And so it's a place within which those stories can occur. And I mean, any person who writes stories or, movies or creates things knows that to have a good story, you have to have conflict. You have to have characters, you have to have something to create the story, because otherwise you would just be, there wouldn't be a story. It wouldn't be intriguing, it wouldn't be interesting.
Well, maybe, but I don't know if that's necessarily true because that's the human drama. But I
Yeah.
think we're getting off that sense of conflict, which draws people in. Maybe I would say possibly, and I don't know, a sense of adventure where you keep expanding into the nature of reality, existence itself, as the adventure unfolds, a never-ending journey, unfolds into the greater possibility, greater and greater possibility. So, yeah, I think conflict got us to a certain level, but it keeps us recycling the emotionality. That was why I think I brought up the thing between the soul, because the soul houses the feeling, but if you indulge in the emotion, you get stuck in this cycle of emotion and conflict and resolution and more and it's the emotion that never gets resolved. Like with depressed people, they just feel it. They may know the story behind it, but because of the chemicals and the indulgence, those feelings become recycled emotions, and you don't get beyond it because you keep going back, like you said, the story. So I think if we tap into this nature of experience, which is what we're here to have, that's why we're here. We're here to experience the totality of the incarnational 3D world, all of it. So if we get stuck in one thing, we're missing a whole bunch of other things that is available to gain the wisdom for the soul's evolution, or what you call self actualization, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Right.
So, okay, then it sounds to me like there's also a similar distinction between, as there was for spirit and soul, as there is between feeling and emotion.
I'm making those things up.
Okay. Well, can you clarify where is your thinking with feeling and emotion then?
Yeah. So feelings is what we have every moment is being recorded. When you have a, like, let's say a angry reaction or a depressed or sad, it's like, if you keep going into that and indulging it in a way, you never really get to the bottom of it because you keep like that thing. And that's emotion. I call that emotionality. I mean, it's great to have emotion, but if you're angry, if someone cuts you off or does something, it's, anger is a natural response. But if you keep going back to that, I mean, anger should last, I don't know, it's no should, but a few minutes and then it subsides. But if you keep going back to it, you've never completed that. So it becomes emotionality and you no longer are feeling it. You're feeling the past and you're not letting go and moving forward or trying to resolve it somehow. So that's where I call it emotions or emotionality and feeling. If you just let yourself feel and go to the depth of that jealousy, then what my teacher says, you've owned that as wisdom because you've gone to the depth of it. When you but you have to feel, if you just keep reacting to it, you never allow it to sink in, to be owned on a soul level. So when you allow yourself to feel the totality of whatever that is, good, bad, beautiful, ugly, then it becomes wisdom to the soul that helps you move on. So this is all my interpretation. I'm not saying this is right at all. Yeah. I'm just saying this is what I read, believe, experienced. So the idea here of incarnation is to own the human experience, is to look at everyone that you pass on the street, everyone, and say, I can feel what they feel. Everyone. It's like when you can own the human experience, which means you've felt everything it's possible for humans to feel. What I think happens is your cellular structure starts to accelerate, starts to vibrate at a higher frequency, because the reason you've come to this 3D level, it's sort of complete because you've come here to have a human experience and you've had it. And, it's a work in progress. And then we're here to start to have new experiences that have yet to be experienced by the human dimension. And that's a sort of ascension. That's a sort of an acceleration. So I think the whole idea of conflict takes us back to the old thing. And maybe the true adventure is the next level of vibratory rate, which has to do with synchronicities, coincidences, love, beauty, joy, creativity. That's a big one that I think one of the main reasons we are here is to be creators, to emulate creation. You know, we're a spark of the divine. The divine has, whatever that is, has created this beauty. And we as creators emulate the creation by being creative expressors. So that's our real function. This is my belief as human beings, is to be the artist, be the creator, be whatever that is to you, whatever that joy is to you. Maybe it's teaching, maybe it's singing, maybe it's talking, maybe it's podcasting, maybe it's writing. Whatever output you have that sparks your highest creativity is, I think, the reason you've come. And what you do is share your feeling nature so other people can relate to that. So we're all here to share our feelings, because we all know what emotion, depression, sad, we all know what that is. But what are the feelings of, and sometimes an art piece or can help you tap into stuff you haven't allowed yourself to feel. Like, yeah, I had broken up with this woman and I didn't really know what I was feeling. And I heard this song and it's like, oh, that it just hit me. It's like, oh, that's what's happening to me. Okay. So I think we benefit from other people's creative expression. And that is another way of owning the wisdom of our feelings, you know? So
yeah.
I don't know.
So when you were talking, it's come up a couple of times while you were talking that I just wanted to bring this in. I had a realization that came through a lot of reading, experiencing, whatever you want to call it, and two people who were creating things that helped me the most. I had this. So my husband died in 2013, and so I was in the midst of grief, and I was listening to all this stuff, and I had listened to Deepak Chopra several times, but you know, you keep hearing the same things over and over. Okay. That's why we're having this conversation, so we can do this. But he had said several times, you know, you're not your thoughts. And there was this idea presented that, you know, we think our thoughts are truth when they're very much not your thoughts. And then he talked about how to be the observer and so forth. And there was a time I noticed I was feeling pretty good. Everything was all right. And then something happened or a thought occurred. And then this grief emotion came in and it was just like this tornado. And I was like, wow, that's really unpleasant. And I could just feel myself going there. But I did exactly what you're talking about. I allowed it to go there. I honored it. And then as that happened fairly quickly, as soon as that happened, it just disappeared. And it reminded me of the way that Bruce Lipton talks about that petri dish, right? Your thoughts are the petri dish of your body. And so the thoughts have an effect on what comes out in the physical reality. So it was like this, you know, you have a thought. And if you think about a thought like the images of the synapses in the brain, you know, it's energy that goes from one place and it has this motion. And if you're just watching it from one place, you notice it come from nothing into something, and then it goes back to nothing. And so that's the way it's felt for me, is that's the way the energy works. It comes, you know, if it's a thought, it comes into fruition, it experiences itself, and then it is gone. And that corresponds with all this stuff that you're talking about. But I found it really funny that even as we discuss this, you know, we're entertaining this idea of self-realization and so forth, and we're actually talking about integrating these ideas into our lives, when actually in reality, we are doing that. We're already there, right? Like it's actually no journey to become self-realized. I mean, of course, there's ways to get better or improve, but in reality, we're actually already doing that.
I think we are. I think that's why we've come here to do that, you know, and I think one other thing to add to that is that this level of reality and the human drama, I mean, yes, there's still war, there's still people starving, there's still awful things happening, but we're going around, not in a circle, but in a spiral to the next level where we're about to meet the next challenge to human existence, which is, off-planet beings that up the level of experience to a whole new realm. And that's what's so exciting about that work. It's like, okay, we could go back to the same old drama, but what does the unknown, what have we yet to experience, and what does meeting the others? And people always project fear, but I don't think there's anything to fear. I mean, it's different. It's shocking. It's a whole other vibration that's hard to cognize, but it's the challenge of our evolution. Because do we want to keep doing the same dramas, the same ridiculous love stories and movies and shoot 'em up cowboy? I mean, I think we're over it, I think it's been done. It's been done great, but there's a whole other adventure that we have no idea about, that we're capable of engaging. And that's the most exciting thing happening now on planet Earth. Yes, it's time to resolve the wars and the awful things and get on with the next level of our soul's interaction of owning a higher experience and elevating the human being so we embrace a bigger reality. And that's sort of what I'm also about, because the government, by holding on to the secrets, they are, and I didn't say this, but this insider from the government, Colonel Carl Mel, says, we're being deprived of the pursuit of happiness. Happiness is, in the sense, knowing what reality is. If we're being denied reality, we're being denied a level of engagement that seems to be here. And I think absolutely, because the government has admitted, and people have had experience, and I've had experiences if you read my book. So what's going on? And that's, I think, this in-between thing that actually self-realization just went to another level, because those beings, whoever they are not different than us. They may be smarter, they may have more technology, but I think on the soul level, they're equal to us. Is my feeling. I can't prove that, but so they're just as curious about us as we would be about them, because, humans are full of drama and emotionality, and maybe they've gone beyond that and forgot what that's like. So they are, oh, that's interesting, but, just so maybe a refresher course on, where their evolution is going. But, the idea is to come into balance with these adventures and hold our sense of feeling sense and expand our intellectual knowledge and make life easier with what obviously these ships are not filling up their gas tank to get here. So we don't have to be enslaved to the fossil fuel company. I don't even think they are fossil fuel, but to these oil gas companies, because the world's been built in that kind of way. So I think we're reaching a point of a nexus point of evolution where we can take charge of our own lives in a much bigger way and be more of the creators by allowing people the freedom, to express. I mean, who would have thought that a working class city in England in the 1960s would produce music that would last a long time?
Yeah.
Right? Produce musicians from Liverpool that would tap into the zeitgeist of the next, century, half century, whatever. But, so those guys, the Beatles, are just like anyone else, but they allow themselves the freedom of expression, and look how much they've added to the world.
Yeah.
So we all have that capability when we tap into this creative flow to add to creation as creators. That's really one of my favorite messages, is to bring out our ability to create and express in whatever form.
Yeah. And so I have an undergraduate in fine arts, and I I've been doing graphics for 25 years, but that was only because I wanted to do art, but I wanted to have a career. So that in the framework, I was like, okay, this is what to do. So, but regardless, you learn when you get a degree in art, you learn the creative process, which is really the same thing for every creative venture, no matter what. And so you get that through and through. And um, the thing that you're touching on there, I mean, I would completely concur with that because what I see is, even just being a consumer of the creative arts, whatever they are, you see these glimpses of truth. And I mean truth in the sense that there are concepts that really can change the way people structure their world. Okay, now it's all intermixed with these other belief systems of the structures and conflict and all that kind of garbage that we are familiar with, but it also has a lot of times they'll have like essences of things. You'll have a song that says something that really emulates the feeling of whatever the experience was. So these people who have love songs, and it doesn't say who it's to. It doesn't, there's not all these real.
It's to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, in the Cutting the Ties That Bind, the one of the big things that came through for me was I get messages through songs, and I had gotten a couple songs and I put them on there, and I get to the end of it, and I knew that I was going to write these words that were going to kind of encapsulate what I had learned. And I did that, and I didn't get it until the very end. But the thing that I got about the songs was there were these love songs, and they weren't even the same genre. They're like all over the board. And I was trying to figure out, well, what's the real message behind these things? I realized, oh, these are, yes, they're love songs, but they're love songs from myself to myself.
Mm.
They're not between two separate humans. It's from me. It's a message from me to
Oh,
me.
that's good. I'd like to hear those songs. I'd like to know what, I mean.
Oh, I'll be glad to share them with you. It's not very many right now. It's only about 5, but I keep, it's a different way of looking at things, right?
Well, I think that's fantastic. That is great. We need more of those. Like what song you think of when that's love to you from you? Like
Well, I'm a female, so I'd like to talk to you about that too, because
okay.
So I'm in a group of people, I'm involved with people, and we're starting to recognize that we're channeling whatever words you want to use to call it. And I take this channeling course, and I finally realized, oh, I've been doing it my whole life. I didn't know that. I know what that feeling is, right? And a lot of times there's these, I would say it's ego based. There's like, it's a belief in the structure of correctness, wrongness, am I doing a good job of that kind of thing? And so a lot of times we'll ask questions like, you channel a message, and then because we're in this group, we get feedback. Well, how does that resonate with you? Does that sit well with you? Most of the time we get really good feedback, but a lot of times what you'll see too sometimes is if somebody's struggling with those belief systems, they really question the information they're getting. And so really what they're doing is questioning themselves. And somebody channeled a message for me because I was not in the state where I was able to receive the message fully and openly. And so she channeled this message, and she actually said, the person through whom the messages come and their ego is just as important as the message itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So given that being said, that's probably why it came through for me in my particular, existence in this time frame really comes through the love songs, because I like love songs. I mean, it's not,
Who doesn't?
I know. Yeah. So anyways, that was really interesting to have all that stuff come through. So then my next question, and maybe this is a topic for next time, but I think there's an overall, as young children come in, you start to see a shift in where their interest is and where it lies. And I do think we're getting to that place where, you're seeing there's very much a disinterest in the old paradigms, the old ways of thinking. And there's a lot of, it really doesn't have to be that way kind of thing. So it's like they have that as the foundation, and they're almost able to skip some of the stuff that we've done in the past and go forward. So, and I do feel like we're definitely ascending, because otherwise we wouldn't be here having a podcast, right? Talking about this. And there wouldn't be people listening. I'm making this podcast because I was guided to do such a thing. I don't even know who's going to listen to it, but the impact I know is important. So where do you think, or maybe just kind of talk a little bit about how going into this new, you were talking about with the outsiders, or what do you want to call them, the aliens, how they have a different way of perceiving things. And I will concur that my experience with knowledge of other, whatever you want to call them, entities, beings, whatever they are, in a different dimension is exactly that. Like, I've actually in hypnosis experienced where I was one of those things and there weren't all these emotions. You didn't get that intensity. And I've been told that several times over. They want to come here, like you said, they're curious because maybe they want a refresher. Maybe they evolved past that. They don't have the conflict. They don't have all this other garbage, but they want the refresher and the feeling part of it. So where do you think we are going? Maybe that's...
Well, if we could make it through this little critical moment I think we're in, it always seems like we're in that moment, but it always gets a little more intense. But I think if we can integrate this higher technology, raise our vibration to get out of the lower levels of human drama. I mean, lower level in the sense that there's people that are really not happy, but they keep doing whatever they're doing, which is their choice, but they don't know they have a choice. But if we can help those people and see that there is a beautiful planet, like I'm in Sedona now, which is just a fantastic place to be, that there's a beautiful planet and there's beautiful experiences, and that everyone is a creative being. Like when you do your graphics or create something, you're bringing something new into the world. You're bringing in a feeling, whatever that graphic expresses. You're creating from the unknown. It never existed before. This book never existed before until I put it together. It's like, and that's satisfying. And I think that's really why we're incarnated here. Yeah, we're here to have relationships and children and all those things. But the deeper part with free energy, with like having everyone live in abundance, so there doesn't have to be things happening where someone's less than, and I mean, that's idealistic and hopeful and I think possible, but it is idealistic. But if we can come to that place where everyone contributes to creation as creators in whatever way, then that's what I call the flowering of humanity. That's what I call like a moment where we've achieved a sense of collective awakening, and and everyone becomes the great musician or follows their passion. And this is what Bashar talks about. You're here to follow your passion every moment of every day, and whatever that passion is. And I think it's being creative in whatever way, or maybe taking a walk. So when humans have an opportunity to do that and go beyond survival, basically is what I'm saying. Go beyond surviving and start to thrive, not survive. Then, we have to go in our minds beyond survival in order to thrive. So but it's a collective cultural thing too. Then the possibilities of human soul expansion comes online in even greater degrees, and joy and love and higher forms of relationship that don't involve those dramas, if that's possible, can be resolved, and then we live in harmony with nature. And then the creative process, because we will have this higher technology and free energy and abundant food, and we don't have to be enslaved to the current money systems. And then we can really become part of a galactic federation where that already is happening in other worlds. And we still are very much caught up in the drama of the emotionality and think conflict is the only way to go. I'm not saying anything, but I think other forms of being are possible, and occasionally you get a glimpse of it. You can just sit back in your house and you're relaxing on the couch and, the world's going on and you just get this sense of peace. Well, I think that's a way everyone can live. I hope. I know it is possible. It's just like it's like the path of the Bodhisattva. You're not happy until everyone is happy or enlightened. So we're moving into that phase of possibility where I think with the technology, if we don't let AI take over our lives and we can disconnect from some of that, but have it be done for us, the things that no one wants to do, really, whatever that would be. But some people enjoy, gardening or whatever, farming, and that's fun but when we have that peace, that sense of flowering, then the creative process really comes online and we start to go deeper into our own feeling nature and tap into things we haven't even allowed ourselves to feel about the adventures of reality. And then we, can live in joy. I mean, if you want to know where I think we could go, that's what I think is possible with the flowering of humanity and a greater future for everyone and world peace.
I definitely think that is a potential, not a potential. I think it is the destination because that's where we want to go. But I also have had a hypnosis session where I was one of those beings. And I experienced it, and it really was interesting because the questions that were being asked of me by the facilitator were really, they were human-based questions. They were still questions, but I think it was to just describe the difference between existing in a place like this, where we do have that conflict and the struggle, and existing in a place where exactly what you're describing, people do what they're inspired to do, and we share that with other people. And so therefore there's no need for money. So poof, that's gone, right?
Right.
So
right.
yeah, I definitely feel like we're getting there. But one part I just want to touch on here in terms of like, sometimes humans, we want to know the linear order of how do we get to that place.
Right.
But and I'm getting to the place where I recognize it doesn't really matter if it comes in order or not. If we just listen to it, we'll get there. But one of the things that is interesting to me is this concept of, we were talking at the beginning about allowing ourselves to feel the experience in its totality, to then allow it to pass through us.
Yes.
And then if we bring that and we take into a concept, let's say somebody is listening to this and they're thinking, how can you get rid of money? Because if you think about it logically, the way they've taught us to think, it's a very difficult thought process of how to get to that place. And then there were some things you were saying were reminding me of, well, the government hiding things, or frankly, religious groups hiding things or propagating this fear or whatever. And to me, that kind of stuff, I've always felt like that comes from the humanness of the experience. Like, I don't think spirituality is incorrect in any way. And there's spirituality all throughout. But if you take it and put it in the container of religion, then you wind up with things like guilt and repentance, all of that stuff. But so I think what we've experienced, at least so far, is that you have certain humans that are they have a dominant role for whatever reason, and they are still in this structure of believing believing the restrictions that these programs put on us, and they kind of perpetuate it. So it's almost like healing those people need to heal what they need to heal. And then when they become the leaders, they become technically more dominant in our areas, then they can then propagate that feeling of oneness and completeness. And
right. If they get the love, if they take those roles because of insecurity, because they want love. I mean, like politicians, they just want to be loved because they never got that. So if we can love the children to its ultimate capacity, then they have that security to not want to dominate, and just because they know they've been loved, so they don't feel a need to control others and desperately seek that. So it gives them the power to be the expression of the love. you know? So you feel it, you express it, you know it, and you just bring it out to the source. So it's like, that's what I think then starts at home, that progress.
Yeah.
And people are caught up in their, lives because they do have needs that haven't been met. And so, yeah, it's a big global movement that I'm looking at, but why not if we could?
Yeah, we can. I know we can. And we will. I think we will.
I think we will.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great quote by H.G. Wells, who said, someday people will look back at old newspapers and think, was there ever such a world?
Yeah.
That was about destruction and, war and starvation. So I think it is I think it is coming. I mean, hopefully. I mean, yeah, I think that's the path that.
I definitely think it's on the way, because there's so many people who are, again, if we look at what we want to create, when we start to recognize that we are the creators, right? We look at what we want to create and see what we don't. That's that contrast, right? You don't know what you want until you've got that contrast, but
exactly.
Then we can
now we got it. We got the contrast. So
yeah.
We really got it now. So we can definitely move on to something where you can own that contrast, so you don't have to experience that again. Okay, got that one. We know what it's like to, Bashar says, it doesn't get any denser than this plane.
Yeah.
So he says, get all the density you can, because we're moving on from here. Because, we're here to own the density in this form, but, things are moving beyond that. So, yeah, it's okay. We've all indulged in whatever that is. So it's time for our new adventure.
Yeah.
Into the unknown. That's what another thing my teacher said, we're here to make known the unknown, which is why people create. You create those graphs. It never existed before. You made known the unknown by bringing it into form. This is why people do podcasts or whatever they do, because that's their soul's ultimate destiny, is to make known the unknown, which adds to creation as creators. Mm-hmm. That's how I see it. I mean, other people.
Well, and I think it's the creations this is what I love about them all. Thing like we talked about the songs. I mean, movies are like that too. There's some paradigm where they want to include the conflict, but then there are parts of it that are, to me, they really resonate as true. And it's like, oh no, that really is reality. That's not pretend, exactly. And that sets the seed for the belief and the thought process. And then somebody else creates something even bigger. So yeah.
No, it's all fun. I think, we're here to have more fun and experience and joy and love and laughter and, feel good.
Yeah.
I mean, but not in an artificial way, like people think drugs or alcohol make. That doesn't actually make them feel good. It numbs them from feeling bad. So feeling good is a self-actualizing process.
Yeah.
And you can't even expect someone else to make you feel good. That's also that drama of attachment. But, it might be nice to have those people around, but it comes from those songs you're listening to, those songs for love, self-love.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical and Infamous podcast with the Happy Lion Center. Send requests for topic discussions, questions, and comments to podcast@happylioncenter.com. That's podcast@happylioncenter.com.